Hey everybody, today I'll be doing a quick comparison and overview of the 65 A90J as seen on the top and the 65 A80J as seen on the bottom. I apologize for any quick cuts or anything that happens like that. I'm just kind of editing over some footage I recorded a couple weeks ago, but I just plan on giving my thoughts and opinions on what I think about the two while I've been using them, so you can just jump right into it. As you can see here by the A80J on the bottom with its reflections and the A90J on the top with its reflections, they hold practically the same. I really can't notice personally a difference between the two while they are both on. For those that are kind of dissuaded by the semi-gloss coating on the 55 and 65 inch variants of the A80J, I would kind of rethink your decision. It's really not a big deal. As you can see here, when the TV is off, then it becomes kind of a bigger gap between one's mirror-like and one's not. But when it's off, who really cares, right? When it's on, they look practically identical. In this next section, I'll go over HDR brightness between the two. What you can't see in the video is that the A90J on top is actually pushing a lot more brightness than the A80J on the bottom, which luckily means that the heatsink is working. It definitely it's doing its job. However, this is a test pattern, a 10% window, 100% white, and this is not something you just would see in the everyday. And as you can see here, another added benefit of the heatsink is that on the A80J there's obviously image retention, and on the A90J up top there is none. Some real-world examples I have in mind of where I see image retention is in HDR gaming on my PS5. Some games include God of War, just sitting in the menus. It can create image retention lasting up to about 20 seconds. Ghost of Tsushima in its bright menu, it can create image retention lasting for, again, 30 seconds. And another one being like Spider-Man Miles Morales. I think even looking at the sun in that game can just cause image retention on the A80J. And this is just an unfortunate fact that just plagues the Sony A80Js, and it happens on any size from 55 inch to 77 inch, and I'm not really sure anything that can be done about it. In this next clip, it's going to be playing the Spears and Munsell test demo at 1000 nits off the Spears and Munsell disc, and I'm just going to quickly talk about audio before I jump into the good stuff. Basically flipping between the two. The A90J has a little bit more bass, and the A80J has a little bit less bass at the same size. It's nothing I would go spend another $2,000 for, but to each their own. It's my personal opinion. I could not tell the difference unless they were side by side. Regarding HDR performance at both 1000 nits, in person, minus the out of the box differences in the white balance, they look identical in terms of brightness. Again, if you're looking to just play normal content on this and expect huge brightness gains, you're not going to get that. And that is just something you have to decide if that's worth it for you. The A90J 100% can push a lot more brightness, at least 100 nits more. But how much content can actually take that, right? In 1000 nit, it's going to look exactly the same, and like I would say 95% of content out there is mastered at 1000 nits for HDR. So basically with the A90J, you are paying at the same size, like $2,000 extra, just for no image retention in gaming, which shouldn't be there in the first place, and maybe some slightly better TV speakers with more bass, where at this point you should probably already have a dedicated audio setup, right? So again, I personally don't think the A90J is worth it for the brand new cost, which at that point you might as well just get the 77 inch A80J instead of any A90J, because it's more value for you. And in this last little bit, I just like to talk about the higher nit content and how it compares between them, because this is where you actually see the bigger difference. So this is the 4000 nit test demo from the Spears and Munsell disc, and I don't believe you can see it in the video again, unfortunately. Sorry, it's just an iPhone. but the top, the A90J, actually just looks, I would say, washed out in comparison to the A80J on the bottom because it's pushing so much more brightness. And that's just an innate thing that comes from the WRGB OLED technology. So as the higher you get in peak brightness, the less color volume you get. So the big takeaway is basically that yes, you will and you can notice a difference in the brightness between the two, except that you'll probably only notice it in about 5% or less of cases. And those cases being anything mastered at higher than 1,000 nits, so 2,000, 4,000, 10,000 nit content, which there is not a lot of out right now. So when you're comparing them, or at least what I noticed was that at 1,000 nits, identical, but anything higher, the A90J is obviously going to look a little bit brighter, but it's going to look more washed out than the A80J. So while some content plays in the background, I'm just going to give my conclusions on what I think between the two. And the big question is the A90J worth it? At the same size? No. At any size? Probably not. Unless you have the money to spend, obviously. Size for size, I don't think the A90J is worth $2,000 more than the A80J. You are basically paying for no image retention and more brightness in like 5% or less of use cases. Does that mean the A90J is bad by any means? And I would say no. I actually think it is the best OLED this year. On the other hand, when it comes to price to performance, I think it's just the worst this year. Yes, it's a beautiful picture, but that same processing is on the step-down A80J. So you're paying more for the same processing. You're paying more for same lack of gaming features which are available on the LGs, and you are paying more for brightness that you can really only see in real-world content that's just less than 5% of use cases. And as an added bonus, I just want to include some gaming clips that I took on my PS5 on the Sony A90J. I just wanted to include it because people do talk a lot about gaming on these Sonys, whether good or bad. And personally, I have only had good experiences with it, gaming on only a PS5 and Nintendo Switch. So, what I have noticed is that people talk about dimming. I personally have not noticed any dimming whatsoever, but it all depends on the type of games you play. So if you play games, I guess, like Destiny 2, for example, which is a big one, it can dim quite a bit. But games like this, without HUDs that are more immersive, I just haven't noticed it at all. I can't really say it's an issue. Another thing would be the lack of gaming features. Again, thanks Sony, they're not even on the PS5 yet, so it really doesn't bother me whatsoever. And lastly, I'll just mention input lag, since people also do talk about that sometimes. I believe it is 16 milliseconds at 60 FPS on the Sonys, and roughly 10 to 12 milliseconds on the LGs. I actually did own an LG C1 at one point, and switching to the A80J and A90J later, I have noticed no difference in input lag while gaming. And it's not been an issue for me, and everything still feels very fluid. And next up is just God of War. Kratos screaming, slashing around. Looks nice and pretty in game mode. And I hope you enjoy. Thanks.